Next workshop, we're down in South Georgia next week, and we are, I think, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday with Georgia Chap. I've got a session, I think, in Milledgeville and one in Thomaston. So we're down in South Georgia next Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I just put up a post on the storm sawing workshop, which we've had a change of management at Berry on the land management, and so they haven't gotten another manager for the land set up yet. So Billy, he left in September, so we haven't been able to get anything confirmed as far as another use of Berry College's site for the spring. But we have been in touch with Biltmore, which I've done workshops there several years ago, and the Biltmore Estates. And they have all types of facilities there that we can use for classroom as well as fantastic field sites. And so Bill there has set up for us to do a workshop the week. It's May 10th, 11th, and 12th. And it's going to be in Asheville, North Carolina at the Biltmore Estates. And I'll have some more information. I just put it up on the website last week. I have some more information on it in the next coming weeks. So we've got 12 seats available, and I think 2 of them will be taken by staff there at the Biltmore. So we've got 10 seats available for that one. And that's a 3-day workshop. We'll be starting on a Tuesday. Everybody come in on a Monday, starting on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday that week. So should be a good one, good site. Hi, Aubrey. Best chainsaw for pro use. I'm gonna have to say a good sharp one is probably about the best. I've always told people, I say, chainsaws don't make chainsaws, people do. And if I look at it from that standpoint, one of the biggest things is having a good local dealership that can handle parts and repairs for you. Some areas I go, they're real strong on steel. Some areas I go are real strong on Husqvarna. Got some areas with strong Echo, and up in New England with John Sered. So, there's 4 or 5 major brands that really do a great job. It's also according to which model that you're kind of looking at size-wise and that kind of thing. But one of the major things is, if you stay with one of those top 4 or 5 brands, in higher use models, the dealer's usually going to have a good stock of parts, and the mechanics are going to be familiar with them, because at some point in time you're going to need that. And maybe you do your own work, you still have to have parts available. So that's a key factor to it. But I've got a Steel 362 with M-Tronic. I've got one with the regular adjustable carburetor. I've got a 562 on Husqvarna with the auto tune. I've also got a 576 for a little larger saw, and I've got a couple of the smaller 338s. But that's really all I've got. So I am not real partial to one of the other brands, but I find that Steel and Husqvarna offer quite a lot of good dealer backing and parts backing for the units. Plus, they're very, very dependable. So let's see here. It looks like you have a duplicate live stream running on your channel. Just a heads up, there's folks watching the other one. Huh. Okay. So I don't know where it would be going out to, let me see if I stop this stream. So maybe that did it. So I think it had two going out because I got OBS running also for recorder. But maybe that did it. Let me know, pistol shooter. So should just have one there now. Yeah, it should have stopped. Can you talk on a chainsaw milling safety? Aaron, are you talking about for milling lumber, or are you talking about a wood mill safety for a plant or something? Been involved with both, do a lot with the paper mills and wood processing mills, but I assume you're talking about like Alaskan sawmill or something like that, lumber mill. Okay. So you had a 400 last saw class. I really like them trying a hand at square ground. Square ground, if you're looking at milling, with a chainsaw mill, square ground offers a very, very smooth cut, almost as smooth as what you'd have with ripping chain. Not quite as much, but very close to it. There's the chisel grind, the square grind on the chain doesn't have to move very much side to side to clear the chips. So the chain tooth stays very straight in the kerf. With a semi-chisel, it kind of moves more left or right. You have more top angle on it. Square ground is about 20 degrees on the top angle, and then you'd have 0 to 10 degrees on ripping chain. And so very little side movement. But square ground gives good chip clearance on ripping. That's for definite. And the 400, that's got plenty of power, probably unless you're into something more than about 24-inch bar or something like that milling. The 400 should have plenty of power for making your lumber. And as far as a milling safety, you got to keep your hands and feet in the right places on that, because it's something to where pushing through with it's according to what type of a chainsaw rig that you have. If it has a frame itself and then the log is on the frame, or whether you're using a bolt onto the log. The biggest thing is don't try to push too hard. You've got to keep a good sharp chain, keep your RPM up. So when you start trying to force things start moving around a little bit. But Alaskan chainsaw mill. There's 2-3 different versions of it that I've seen over the years, but that's one of the best that you can be able to. It's according to which one you have, but it's they clamp onto the log, or either you got the framework style on it. So either way, it works out pretty good. Just make sure you keep all your bar attachment bolts and that type of stuff tightened, so you don't have any loose rigging on it. But you can really make some. It's a slow go, but you can really make some beautiful lumber with those chainsaw rigs. They make things pretty accurate, actually. All right, so pistol shooter. I see I took the other channel off of it. I've got it set up on an OBS software also, and I guess it went straight to YouTube. So, and also I'm going to try to get a simulcast going on the next one on Facebook. So you can actually do that with that software. So it should work out pretty good. But going back to the workshops a little bit, that 3-day in Asheville, I've been doing a 3-day around the country a good bit with city, county, and state. But it's actually, I started off with it, been about 12 years ago. We put it together for the storm sawing workshops at Berry College. And it's something where we start off on day one, just about a half a day of classroom, going through the basics, looking at all the different aspects of personal protective gear and sharpening and reactive forces, and some planning processes for reduced downtime maintenance, and also for standing trees as well as horizontal. I found that the first step on the training process with that is to kind of make your own pressures and binds to kind of start off with, and then you can move it over to a storm situation if you have some blowdowns and things like that. Which at Berry, usually we had a couple areas that we could go to be able to work with the already downed or uprooted, blown over storm trees. So it worked out good there, and I'm sure we'll basically have the same thing at Biltmore this time too. But after lunch on the first day, we go out and I do a little demonstration and go through the felling of trees. We talk about that. And day two, we have a little competition going with felling the trees. So everybody gets to take down a tree, and we crisscross them up to start to make some storm situations, some pressures and binds. And so that works out good. And then that afternoon on the second day, we start really practicing on sharpening and checking out the chainsaws. We try to have most people bring their own saws, but I do have 2 or 3 usually that we have there that people can use if they're flying in or whatever. But we go through that Tuesday evening, and then or second day, Wednesday evening, Thursday, we actually work in teams, looking at hangers, spring poles, different types of pressures and binds, offset cuts, tongue and groove, and what we call a slide notch and notch and hinge, to be able to work with the storm situations. And it's really worked out well in the groups because we work on some planning together, because you're usually working around some other folks, and so it helps on the planning together, especially with the cities and towns that I work with. The teams really help to solidify how things work, because you can kind of see really when things go wrong as well as when they go right. So it really helps out that way. So the 3-day program is something that it covers most all of the bases. It's not a whole lot of saw time for participants, but it is probably about 30% or so. And but it gives you such an ability to go back and share information, or to know what to look for and where to find the different information that you need on your own later. I found that if you have a good basis on everything, then it tends to make it easy to be able to practice and get better at it. So let's see, what are your thoughts on chainsaw Chap protective clothing ratings? I've had a hard time figuring out most appropriate leg protection due to differences in Euro versus American testing specs. In the United States here, we basically have 2 different testing situations on leg protection. We've got what really was established to begin with, and the first real leg protection that was out there was U.S. Forest Service. And so they kind of set up the specs and helped design some of the first machines for their tests for procurement standards. And that was based on roughly a 2,800 feet per minute chain resistance. In other words, in certain positions of the chain, and also in certain RPMs, certain type chain, they set up the test, and in those crossovers, different positions, it had to resist a cut through on the pads. and that was up to 2,800 feet per minute. And then the ANSI B175 standards and all with that came about in the middle 80s started to set up the criteria for kickbacks and those kinds of things. And another rig system was set up by General Industry, and more or less that became following the Forest Service between 2,800 and 3,000 feet per minute on that particular test rig. There's really only a couple rigs in the United States that at that time, and they pretty much set up a UL classification. At that point, I believe it was ANSI, and then it changed over to an ASTM standard, if I'm not mistaken. And then Europe was basically working on the ISO standards, which was more or less 3,600 feet per minute at that time. And so it went from about a 4-layer chap to, with the ISO, usually a 6-layer, and some of those now, I believe, are in 5-layer. You know, my biggest thing with leg protection and a lot of PPE is just trying to get people to use it. And just about anything that had a UL classification on it, whether it was the 2,800 or 3,600, it was something that was better than a pair of blue jeans. And so that was the main emphasis. And now we've got so many different outlets. You know, the pads are pretty much the same. You either have the Kevlar pads, or you have Inch-Tex or Prolar. So those are pretty much the pad materials. And then you've got now all kinds of gamuts of outside materials, which make it for comfort and water resistance and all that kind of stuff. And so that's one of the biggest things. Those two, you know, pretty much meet. I mean, you can take, as far as I've watched them on the rigs in several different situations in the test years ago, but I've done so many of them, you know, cutting and demonstrations across the country with used chaps and new pants and used pants and different size saws. And really, I find sometimes smaller saws are less jammable, I guess you'd say. That's what I call it, is the chaps really work off of jamming. And so it's not that much the larger saws as far as cubic inch as much as it is the length of the bar, and you know, how much area that bar is able to get to as regards to the chap surface or leg surface. So it's something that either one of them offers pretty decent protection for most saw gamuts. And you know, they're not really designed in application to be cut proof. They're designed to hopefully lessen an injury, and that's, I think, how we really have to look at it. There's been a lot of questions about you know, the battery saws, and I can tell you from years past, the corded larger electric saws used in mills and some different applications where you had generators or power cords available. Those didn't slow down much. The armatures were big. They were a lot of horsepower in the armature, and they would go pretty much through any chap. But the battery saws tend to you know, kind of stall down pretty easy, kind of like what you have with the gasoline with a centrifugal clutch. The centrifugal clutch starts to slip. Well, these battery saws now, because the way the drive systems are, they tend to, as if the motor gets to a certain stall, then it basically shuts off. And so most all the testing that I've heard about, which is not really much documented at this point, but the ones I've done 3 or 4 with different saws at power companies and stuff, and all of them have stopped. You know, so it's worked pretty good as far as leg protection goes. But Going back to the Euro or American testing specs, I think Steel basically chose years ago, because of their international business, to go with the ISO standards. And so most everything they had was 6 to even 9 layers at one time. So, that's what you'll find on most of theirs, because that's a choice they made on their marketing and their products. And I know that some of the newer chap and leg protection manufacturers out there, the same basic pads, but they're a lot of them are 4 and 5 layer now that are very close to the ISO standards. So from what I understand, so leg protection has come a long way since I was first involved with it. But Tim's on there. Chaps and pants don't last forever either, he says, and make sure you feel them and get rid of them and fibers don't feel right. And what he's talking about there is a lot of times with the chaps and pants, after you wear them a while, the matted fibers will start to separate. And so you've got, 5, 6 to 9 layers, and the material is crisscrossed across different the way it's actually loomed. And so more or less as you start to bend at the knees and different things, the fibers start to separate. And when they do, many times it's a very small thing, but it can't have a lot of binding around the edges. It's real tight, because at that point then the chainsaw can't pull the fibers out. It's like sewing through the material or putting a patch on it or something. It inhibits it as well as dirt and debris does. But when it separates like that, it pulls away, and it tends to slide down in the pad. So you'll reach down to the bottom, at the bottom of your pad on the leg, and you'll notice there's kind of a big ball of it down there, and that's because it's pulled away from the sides and slid down. So make sure that you check that. And definitely when you have pants that are real tight, the material tends to tighten up around your knees, and that'll it doesn't do quite as good a job at pulling out to jam the saw. So that's something to think about there too. You want them to kind of fit loosely but snugly so they don't rotate around, but you need to have a little bit of room there in the knee area. We used to call it an articulated knee, and the pants we designed, we always gave a little bit more pocket area there for the knee to go into. Let's see. Thanks for the discussion. Appreciate the info. Battery saws versus chaps as well. Okay. And yeah. I just posted a couple days ago a redo of an interview I had with David Breeden. He's the Husqvarna representative for North Georgia, and I've got a lot of information on there on the battery saws, and we talked a little bit about some of the information that they put out recently on the leg protection with the battery saws. So you might want to take a look at that too. So that's kind of interesting as far as Husqvarna's view on it. Well, we've got a couple more minutes here. We're not going to go too long tonight. I want to try to set these up, and I just wanted to get everything kind of checked out tonight, and we'll do a little bit more promotion on it, try to get these things together. And but if you do have some different topics, I'll be glad to try to put together some video, or maybe even we can move back to the shop area and go through some things, maintenance or sharpening or whatever. So Aaron says, when and where did you get started with chainsaws and chainsaw safety? Aaron, this is about my, I think, close to 43 years. I started off working on chainsaws and lawnmowers back in the middle 70s out of high school, and went to work with a distributor in Atlanta, and got involved helping them with some of the service schools and really enjoyed that. And then I went in business or started working for a gentleman to open a shop in Georgia, and I ended up, I tried to buy it out, and I did, but then ended up kind of went broke in the early 80s. And one of the distributors again picked me up, and they had McCulloch chainsaws. They became the southeastern distributor for McCulloch. And one of the McCulloch reps left and became general manager for Steel, and Richard Burchett. And he became a real mentor for me, and it was closer to home, so I went to work with the distributorship for Georgia. And that's when, about the time Steel had formed a contract agreement with Soren Eriksson, and Soren had sold out Nord for him, and his two partners, other partners, had sold out that to Electrolux in the late 70s. He had come to the States, moved to South Carolina, and he actually was working with companies like Scott and Westvaco and those types, and doing some training and shows for Steel. And so I had helped put together some of them in Georgia, and he and I kind of hit it off. He was actually, at that time, he had Swedefor, which was producing his protective clothing, and that he was supplying to a lot of the paper companies and all. And he ended up moving that. It was in Eclectic, Alabama to begin with. That's where I got involved in helping putting together different chap styles and pant styles. And then he moved it to Summerville, South Carolina, and that's still, it's the Grants Forest today, is still producing most all of the U.S. Steel personal protective gear. And so I was pretty well involved with that, helping with design and different things back in those days, and that was in the middle to late 80s. And then in 1989, the guy who he was kind of the rep for Steel, became the national sales manager. And so I decided to go to work for them, and I worked for Steel Incorporated and traveled the whole country as applications manager, still keeping up with Soren and all. And then that gentleman, Dave Zerfoss, he left, and he became the North American president for Husqvarna. And so Soren and I went over to Husqvarna. They got behind our game of logging training system, and Steel had done a great job sponsoring it up till then and getting it started. And then Husqvarna got behind it, and then also started one Arbor Games for tree care and utilities, and that became Arbor Master Training. Ken Palmer, Rip Tompkins, and I. And so I've been involved with the training side of it, and even put together a team of 12 instructors for Husqvarna. And that was from 2005, I guess it was, till about 2008. They had licensed out my company, Forced Applications, and Laura and I went to work for them, putting together the training programs. And so that's what it was. Then I came down with colon cancer and left Husqvarna. And so for the past 12, 13 years now, I've been just Laura and I doing the training with Forced Applications across the country. So that's kind of the background in a nutshell. So been doing it for quite a number of years, and working very closely with Steel and Husqvarna, Oregon Cutting Systems. And so they've been good to me. Chainsaws have been good to me over the years. So yeah, I used to work on Noah's saws there, Tim. That was a few days ago, but yeah, it was waiting to hit dry ground, and we had to cut the trees out to be able to get that boat to be able to land properly on ground. So that was how it worked. Am I still working with Steele's new files? I was just part of the feasibility, market feasibility for the United States, and all I had was one bar and one file, and that was the Hexa system. And so I've used up pretty much the file that I had, and I've kept the chain. I've kind of hand filed some other conversions, but I've still got the chain, but it's back about halfway. But hopefully we're going to start seeing that Hexa chain and files after the first of the year, from what I understand. So it's a pretty neat system. There's not a lot of difference in the chain itself, but the file for maintaining it and could be used on converting others is a pretty neat system. So anyway, I didn't know he was your age. Lost me on that one. Didn't know who was he, Mr. Buzz? I didn't know he was your age, Tim. Oh, I see now. You're talking about Cotton Top. It takes me a little while because I'm a little bit older than Cotton Top 3. He's still kind of a young feller. If you can watch him up in the trees, you'll see what I'm talking about. Let's see. You need a few more moderators, my friend. Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. All right. Well, y'all can send some topics, put them in the comments, and we'll try to follow up on different things and try to build it up a little bit. Appreciate you all coming out tonight, and hopefully we'll see you again maybe next weekend or so. And so y'all have a great one and good sawing.